Have you ever wondered what happens when a dynasty becomes so afraid of losing power that it's willing to give birth to children who are no longer entirely human? In the frozen winter of 1661, the ancient palace of Valderón echoed with unending prayers. Queen Mariana, pale and trembling, struggled through the agony of childbirth. Her only son, Carlos, was born beneath the weight of a family curse, his bloodline imprisoned by the sins of his own ancestors. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss the haunting stories of history buried beneath centuries of silence. Have you ever wondered what happens when power fears extinction more than death itself? In the frozen winter of 1661, the towers of Valderón Palace echoed with 1,000 prayers. Inside the royal chamber, Queen Mariana screamed through labor while monks chanted Latin verses to drown out her cries. The air was heavy with incense and fear. As dawn broke, a boy was born silent, pale, with eyes that refused to close. No cry, no breath of life, only a faint pulse that made the midwife cross herself in terror. The court proclaimed it a miracle. "The prince sleeps in the arms of angels," the herald announced. But in the dim candlelight, the old nurse swore she heard the infant whisper something in a voice that was not his own. The queen, trembling and half delirious, clutched her rosary and whispered, "He bears their mark." To the nobles of Valderón, the child was more than a prince. He was proof that their sacred blood had not been diluted by common flesh. For generations they had married within their own line, cousins to cousins, uncles to nieces, as though sealing their veins against time itself. They called it purity, yet behind those gilded words hid a slow, creeping decay. In the crypt beneath the palace, carved on an ancient slab, lay a prophecy no one dared to read aloud. When the blood forgets to wander, the crown shall give birth to the unspeakable. Every marriage had drawn the family closer, not in unity, but in collapse. Their faces began to share the same sharp chin, the same sunken eyes, the same trembling hands. The priests blessed it as divine resemblance, the physicians called it destiny, and so the newborn Carlos became both heir and omen. His birth was celebrated with feasts and fireworks, yet the torches burned low and the horses refused to approach the chapel. Even the ravens circling above the palace seemed restless that night. No one dared to speak the truth aloud. The royal blood of Valderón was not sacred. It was poisoned by their own worship of themselves. The court summoned Hernán de Voro, an aging master whose hands had painted saints and sinners with equal frankness. He arrived at dawn, hunched beneath a wool cloak, muttering that he no longer painted children. "Children change," he told the steward. "Paint cannot keep up." Yet by evening he stood before the cradle, brushes arranged like scalpels, searching the infant's face for the line between blessing and blight. At first he sketched in confident strokes the roundness of the cheeks, the delicate lids. Then his hand slowed, the chin lengthened beneath the charcoal as if of its own will. A hollow darkened where light should have rested. Hernán stepped back, wiped his brow, and steadied the easel. "Hold still," he whispered, though the child had not moved at all. When he touched the brush to the lips, a cold draught wound through the chamber, and the candles thinned to blue. The painter felt watched from behind his own eyes. He finished at midnight and covered the canvas without ceremony. "Do not hang this," he told the queen. "Keep it from mirrors, keep it from moonlight." She demanded to see it. Hernán bowed and refused, which very nearly cost him his head. The queen relented only when the confessor murmured that some images are windows and some doors. The portrait was sealed in a leaded vault beneath the oratory. Still, rumors moved faster than locks. Servants whispered that on windy nights the linen shroud rose and fell, as if the painting were breathing. Could a likeness age while the living face remained unchanged? In the hush that followed the christening, the court pretended not to remember how Queen Mariana had entered the family. Niece, then bride, ward, then wife. The candles of that wedding had sputtered for no reason the sacristan could name. Was it merely poor tallow, or a warning that the past was close enough to touch? The union had been defended from pulpits as obedience to providence. The river must water its own banks, the bishop had said. Yet rivers that refuse the sea become swamps. On their first night, a mirror misted, though no breath touched it. Footsteps were heard in an empty corridor, slow and formal, as if a procession had resumed after centuries of pause. The king laughed it off. He had learned early that doubt is treason. Mariana did not laugh. She slid her rosary beneath the pillow and felt each bead like a tooth. Years later, when Carlos lay in his cradle, she traced the child's profile and recognized her uncle's bone beneath her own blood. She prayed for a future that did not look backward and woke to find the window frost etched with a lattice identical to the family tree. Who can tell when devotion to lineage turns into devotion to a tomb? And if the door was opened by love, who will be brave enough to close it now? The night Prince Carlos entered the world, no one in Valderón Palace forgot the silence that followed. Infants cry, animals wail, even the wind has its voice, but this child greeted life with nothing but stillness. When the midwife lifted him, his skin felt strangely cool, as though he had been born already waiting. The queen demanded a sign that her son was blessed, but the only answer came from the cracked ceiling, a single droplet of wax falling onto the infant's forehead, marking him with a white scar that never faded. The court physicians claimed it was a good omen, that such calmness showed divine peace. Yet the servants crossed themselves each time they passed his cradle. They said they heard soft murmurs in the dark, not the babble of a baby, but the muttering of an old man remembering sins. When dawn came, his eyes would fix on the sunlight, as if studying a language he did not understand. One night, the nurse Lucia entered the nursery and froze. The child was awake, sitting upright, though no one had taught him how. His lips moved slowly. "Who's there?" she whispered. And then, faint but clear, the answer, "You are." She fled before the queen arrived, and by morning she was gone from the palace forever. The official story said she'd returned home to care for her mother, but in Valderón, everyone knew that the dead do not send letters. When Carlos turned 8, the kingdom demanded a celebration. The people were restless, their faith needed a face to bow to. The boy was dressed in embroidered velvet, a sword nearly as long as he was tall strapped to his side. As the trumpets blared, he was carried to the throne, not walking, but borne by 4 guards who kept their eyes down. The archbishop crowned him with trembling hands. The moment the golden circlet touched his head, every candle in the hall flickered. Some swore the air thickened, others that the shadows bent toward him like loyal dogs. From the balcony, Queen Mariana smiled too widely. "Long live the king," she said, her voice catching halfway. Those close to the dais saw that the boy's gaze never met the crowd. He was staring at something behind the archbishop, an ancient statue of Saint Raphael, its stone eyes polished smooth from centuries of devotion. Only Carlos saw the faint red glimmer in its pupils. Later that night, he asked his mother, why did the saint move when no one else did? The queen hushed him, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "He moves only for kings." But servants swore that after midnight, the statue's hands were found turned inward, as though covering its face. By adolescence, King Carlos lived more in shadow than light. His tutors abandoned him one by one, muttering about divine confusion. He could not read nor ride, yet at night, servants found him sitting before his mirror for hours, whispering softly to his reflection. The court called it prayer. Those who listened closely said the voice that answered was not his own. His favorite attendant, Elisa, stayed with him longest. She swore the king's reflection, sometimes delayed by a heartbeat, before copying his movements. One night, she entered his chamber after hearing a crash. The mirror lay in shards, though no storm had shaken the palace. Carlos sat in silence, blood trickling from his hand. "He tried to leave," he murmured. Elisa knelt to gather the glass, whispering, "Who, Majesty?" "The one in there," he said. "He wanted my place." A week later, Elisa vanished. Her slippers were found near the palace lake, the hem of her gown tangled in reeds. The guards said she must have fallen, but Carlos refused to leave his room for 3 days, muttering that the water took what the mirror could not. From then on, all mirrors were covered at night by royal decree. The courtiers obeyed without question. Some superstitions are safer believed than tested. While the young king's mind faltered, Queen Mariana grew iron in her spine. The ministers deferred to her, the priests followed her whispers. She ruled by candlelight, her private chambers reeking of incense and burnt offerings. Rumors spoke of secret rites, goat's blood drawn into bowls of silver, prayers recited backward, and portraits turned to face the wall. Every full moon, the queen descended into the palace crypt to consult the ancestors. No one accompanied her, except the confessor, who aged 10 years in one. When asked what he'd seen, he answered only, "Some prayers should remain unanswered." Outside, the kingdom starved. Inside, the palace glittered with denial. Every feast was a masquerade, where the nobles drank to a monarch who barely spoke. The queen toasted louder each time, her eyes darting to the empty throne beside her. Some said she kept ruling not out of love for her son, but out of terror that if she ever stopped, the things she had called up from the dark would come to collect what was owed. In the capital's back alleys, mothers began warning their children, "Disobey, and the silent king will come for you." They did not know that in the highest tower of Valderón, that very king sat awake, listening. At 20, King Carlos was married to Maria Luisa de Orland, a gentle French noblewoman chosen more for politics than love. When she arrived at Valderón, her youth and laughter briefly warmed the corridors, but that warmth did not last. Her husband rarely spoke, and when he did, his words wandered like dreams half remembered. He spent nights pacing the chapel, muttering to unseen listeners. On their wedding night, Queen Mariana insisted they sleep beside the embalmed bodies of their ancestors in the royal vault. "Let them bless your union," she said, pressing a candle into Maria Luisa's trembling hands. The young queen obeyed, though she later confessed she heard breathing among the coffins, slow, heavy, like the shifting of stone. Weeks passed. Maria Luisa began to fade. Her letters home spoke of cold fingers brushing her neck while she prayed, of her husband whispering names that were not hers. One dawn, the servants found her in the corridor, barefoot and pale, eyes staring at the ceiling. "There was someone behind the walls," she murmured before collapsing. She died soon after. The court declared it an illness of the heart. Yet the nuns who prepared her body said her skin had stiffened like marble, her lips frozen in a silent scream. The king appeared at her funeral, unmoved, tracing circles on his cuff with one shaking finger. He asked only one thing, that her coffin remain sealed with iron nails. To still the rumors, the court arranged another marriage, this time to Anna von Neuer, a German duchess known for her studies in forbidden scripture. She brought with her a collection of relics and a heavy mirror framed in black wood. "Saint Helena saw truth in this glass," she told the king. "Perhaps it will show you mercy." In the beginning, Anna tried to heal him. She prayed, mixed herbs, and read by candlelight until her eyes bled from sleeplessness. But the mirror soon changed her. Servants whispered that she spoke with her reflection in a language no one knew. Once, she cried out during Mass, claiming the glass had laughed at her. When the Queen Mother died, the mirror cracked without being touched. That same night, Anna awoke to find her husband sitting at its foot, staring at the jagged surface. "Do you see her?" he asked. "She says she's not done ruling." By morning, every mirror in the palace was covered again, save one, the mirror of St. Helena, which now stood in the royal chapel, veiled but humming softly, as if alive. Soon after, Anna fell ill. Her final words before slipping into delirium were, "Close the eyes of the dead before they open ours." The king never remarried. The mirror remained. By the time King Carlos reached 30, the kingdom had grown used to the scent of decay. His once youthful face sagged like melting wax. His body swelled until even silk robes could not hide the trembling of his limbs. The court physicians prescribed elixirs of gold dust and powdered pearls, but each sip seemed to drain him further. They whispered among themselves that his body was forgetting how to be human. The king could no longer walk without aid. His feet left faint black marks on the marble floors, stains no servant could scrub away. His eyes grew milky, his voice reduced to a rasp. And yet, each morning, he was carried to the throne for audiences he could barely endure. The nobles bowed before him, pretending not to notice the bandages beneath his sleeves or the faint rattle in his breath. At night, the palace stank of medicine and candle smoke. A nurse once claimed to see him rise from bed long after his attendants had gone. "Majesty, you should rest," she whispered. He turned slowly, his face half in shadow. "I was," he said, "but they keep waking me." When dawn came, the nurse had vanished, leaving only her rosary twisted around the bedpost. From that day on, the king's chambers were guarded by men who swore never to speak of what they heard behind those doors, the muffled cries, the dragging footsteps, the soft murmur of voices counting backward in Latin. Still, the council demanded he appear in public. "The body may fail," they said, "but the image must not." And so, the hollow king sat upright while painters immortalized him, capturing his sunken eyes and pale, swollen lips. Their portraits showed a monarch still clinging to life. But in truth, Valderón was ruled by a corpse that had not yet learned it was dead. As the king's strength waned, so did the patience of Europe. France, Austria, and England circled like wolves, each eager to seize his crumbling crown. In the palace, courtiers plotted, each faction whispering different names for the heir. The king's confessor, Father Taddeo, urged him to settle the matter before it was too late. One stormy night, the priest entered the chamber to find the king alone, hunched over his desk. The candles burned low, their flames bending away from him. "Your Majesty," Taddeo said softly, "the time has come to decide." The king looked up, his lips cracked and bleeding. "They have decided," he whispered. "What do you mean?" the priest asked. "The ones beneath," Carlos said. "They have chosen their own successor." On the parchment before him lay his will, signed not in ink but in a deep crimson smear. The document named no living man, only the rightful heir of the blood unbroken. No one could decipher what it meant. The ink had not dried even hours after his death. When the priest lifted the page, the mark of a hand appeared beneath it, pressed from the other side. No wax seal, no royal emblem, just the impression of something that should not have been there. The next morning, messengers fled to every capital of Europe. War was inevitable, and in Valderón, the king's chamber door was found locked from within. They broke it open to discover the throne empty and the window wide. The curtains fluttered like wings in the cold morning wind. The death of King Carlos should have brought peace, but peace never visits houses built on secrets. The bells of Valderón tolled 13 times an omen the priests refused to explain. When the coffin was opened for the final rites, gasps rippled through the hall. The king's body had not decayed. His skin was pale and waxen, the lips tinged with faint color, as though he merely slept. "A miracle!" cried the archbishop, but the undertaker's hands trembled. "No," he whispered, "it's a mistake of the grave." They sealed the coffin with iron nails and laid him in the royal vault, under stone and prayer. Yet nights after, guards reported soft tapping sounds from below, rhythmic and deliberate. The Queen's confessor ordered psalms to be sung every midnight, but the sound continued until one dawn. It stopped. A year later, during renovations of the crypt, masons broke into a hidden chamber. Inside stood the king's coffin, open. The body was gone, the sheets inside still warm as if recently left. Only the royal crown remained, resting upside down on the floor. Across the kingdom, strange things began to happen. Children claimed to see a tall figure in the palace gardens, pale-faced, walking as if half remembering his steps. Horses bolted at shadows. One night, the palace dogs were found dead, their eyes wide in terror. And on the anniversary of his death, the chapel mirror cracked again, forming a single line down its center, dividing one face into two. The people began to whisper, "The silent king walks." The church burned every portrait of him, every coin bearing his name. But some said that when the moon rose red over Valderón, you could still hear the sound of iron nails rolling across the marble floor, one by one. The dynasty of Valderón did not survive him. Within months, civil war tore the land apart, neighboring empires devoured what remained, and the once golden palace fell into ruin. Yet the story of Carlos II, the silent king, the cursed heir, refused to die. Historians wrote that he was not a monster but a mirror, reflecting what power becomes when it breeds only with itself. His deformities were not punishment from heaven, but the slow arithmetic of arrogance. He was the sum of every sin his fathers refused to admit, one scholar said. Centuries later, travelers who dared to visit the ruins spoke of whispers in the hallways, the scent of melted wax, and portraits whose eyes seemed to follow them. A few claimed to have seen a faint figure seated upon a broken throne, crowned not with gold, but with dust. No empire endures forever, not Rome, not Valderón, not even ours. And perhaps the truest horror is not the curse of kings, but the blindness of those who repeat it, century after century, believing themselves immune. So tell me, when you look into the mirror tonight, what blood looks back at you?